we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, now we're with you. We didn't hear anything you just said, Robert.
Oh, sorry. Can you unmute everybody, because I'd like to hear where everybody's from. And so how many people are like here from Durango? I see everybody's muted still.
Yeah, I can't unmute everybody from this side, but mute. Okay, hang on a minute. Allow people to mute themselves. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I still
David,
see that.
Robert, yeah.
How many people here from the Durango area?
Yes.
Great, great. How about from other places in Colorado?
Boulder.
Anybody talk?
Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, all right, thank you. How about any other place in the
New Mexico.
Mountain Time Zone?
New Mexico.
Mexico, all right. Any place else in the Mountain Time Zone?
Arizona.
Arizona. All right, thank you. And on the West Coast?
Yosemite, California.
Fantastic. Alaska or Hawaii?
Oregon.
Oregon, cool. And Central Time Zone?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay. Madison?
Madison, Wisconsin.
New
Orleans.
And on the East Coast?
Maryland.
Maryland?
Maryland.
Pennsylvania.
Connecticut.
Florida.
Florida? All
Yeah.
right. And how about from other countries? Well, we have Edwin from Kenya, and I saw somebody in the chat room say that they were from the Galapagos.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, she's muted, Gilda.
Gilda.
Okay, okay, Sawa.
Can't hear you.
From Ecuador, right here.
Well, those of you who have been on trips with me before, and you know that I always tell them when we're over that this group was the best group ever. But I have to say that this group here is definitely the best group ever that I've ever given a virtual presentation to in November. Now, the program, I did this about a year ago to the Bird Club, Durango Bird Club, and I realized that this audience is going to be a little different, so I changed things around a little bit, and we'll still see plenty of bird pictures, but we're going to talk about some other environmental considerations as well, and conservation. And I am just really, really thrilled to have with us tonight my good friend, Dr. Willis Okech-Oyogo. I first met Willis back in the 1990s, and he was a safari guide, and I was leading photo tours in Kenya. Willis now has a PhD from UCLA as assistant professor of African and Environmental History at Sam Houston State University. He specializes in African environmental history with research interests that include the history and nature of human-wildlife conflicts, African environmental ideologies, ornithology, and conservation sanctuaries as emblems of ethnic identity. Willis, will you just say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I met Bob. I don't remember exactly the first year I met you, Bob, but sometime in the 90s, I believe. And then I've been, as Bob said, I've been in the US for a while now. I'm still a guide. I still guide. I miss guiding. I haven't been for a while, but I did all my higher education in the US. I did Miami University of Ohio and then went to UCLA for grad school. And then now I'm in Texas. So it didn't occur to me until we visited Bob in Durango with my family 2 years ago. I didn't even remember that he was one of us who wrote me one of those reference letters when I was actually applying for college. So it was such a long time that I didn't remember. So thanks, Bob. But here I am, and I'm happy to meet some of you. I remember Bill and a few other people here, so glad to meet the rest of you, but hope this will be a good presentation.
Thank you. And now, Edwin, I'm also really thrilled to have Edwin Slemko with us. He's probably one of the very best birders in all of Kenya, and also an artist, and does wonderful artwork as well, wonderful drawings. Edwin, would you just say a few words?
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Kenya and Africa. It's very early in the morning here, 4 o'clock. It was a few minutes before few hours before my normal waking up time. But I'm really glad to be with you and see my good friends, Willis and Robert. It's been long since we saw you. And I think a few other people I don't remember. From the last trip. I think I've done a few trips with Bob, and I am I'm a safari guide in Kenya for Origin Safaris, and I started birding as a young man, and I still enjoy it up to this day. And you can imagine we had a great time with Bob and all other birders that were in our last safari. So glad to be with you. And greetings.
Greetings.
Hello to you.
Thank you, Edwin. This is just so neat. I'm just so thrilled to have Willis and Edwin here tonight. Before we get going, I just want to, usually when I give talks, lectures, and presentations, it's usually in a classroom or lecture hall or something like that. And it's usually in front of an audience. And usually it's around this time of the evening, and some people have had their dinner already. And what happens is when the lights go down and I start my droning monologue, sometimes people's heads start nodding off, you know, and going sleep, getting a little sleepy and things. So as the food from their, the blood goes to their bellies to digest their food and out of their brains. So what I tell people after each presentation is that when we get to the end, I always say in a very loud voice, and this is the last slide. And then when the lights come up, everybody looks awake and alert and attentive. So I think I'll remember to do that with this group as well. Hopefully, this won't take more than a couple of hours. I'm just teasing. It'll be much quicker than that. But let's, okay, can we see this now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Anybody know what this bird is?
It's kind of in the family of the stork family.
Yes, that's right. It is. Know what kind of stork? Very good.
No.
This is a saddle-billed stork, and we know it's a female because it has a yellowish eye. The male has a black eye. Okay, let's see here. All right, I love this quote. I believe that there is no sickness of the heart too great. It cannot be cured by a dose of Africa. Families must go there to learn why they belong together on this earth. Adolescents to discover humility, lovers to plumb old but untried wells of passion, honeymooners to seal marriages with a shared sense of bafflement, those shop-worn with life to find a tonic for futility, the aged to recognize a symmetry to twilight. I know this all sounds a bit much, but if ever I have seen magic, it has been in Africa. This is by John Hemingway, Ernest's son. Those of you who are interested in my camera gear, a lot of these images were taken with the Canon 500 f4 with a 1.4 teleconverter and a a camera with a crop factor of 1.6. So this is the equivalent of 1120 millimeters. 11. And I believe that they say that words are more powerful than the sword. Well, I think the photographs can also make a big difference in persuading people and getting a message across. So I encourage everybody when they're out there to also take pictures of environmental concerns as well and pass things on. Now, when I first gave this presentation last year, I Googled birds of East Africa. And if you look at the bottom, the third thing that came up, the third website was actually my website, robertwinslowphoto.com. And so for some reason, people, this is my website. Incidentally, there's for birds of East Africa, it's the most popular website gallery on my website. And there's, you can see there's 164 different images there. And I'm not going to show you them all tonight, so don't worry about that. But in looking at the popularity of how many people look at my different galleries, you can see that last year when I did this, there were over 15,000 visits to that, to birds of East Africa website. The second one down is a photo shoot I did for the Durango Chorus. So it's very, very popular internationally. And so I get these calls from emails from people all over the world asking me to identify their pictures from Africa when they've gone on safari. And then, and believe it or not, I'm actually able to answer quite a few of their questions. And when I can't, then I ask somebody like Edwin to maybe help me out. But and then people start sending me pictures from places like Asia and South America. And I have no idea what these things are. And so, but these people regard me as an expert on birds, and I'm not even that good in our local county. But anyway, this is Africa, and we talk about East Africa. Some people think about over on the right-hand side is the Horn of Africa right here, and East Africa is this area here. And what we're going to talk about is Kenya. And we fly into Nairobi, and there's a number of different things that we visit in and around Nairobi at different times. Of course, Nairobi National Park, the Daphne Sheldrake Animal Orphanage, the Kazuri Factory, the Karen Blixen's house, the reptile museum, and so forth. Then we go up, we've stayed a number of times up in the mountains by Mount Kenya. Sometimes we go over to Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, and we'll go up to Samburu and maybe Buffalo Springs as well. Coming back down, we'll go to a place called Opajita Wildlife Conservancy, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Then we'll go down into the Rift Valley where there's Lake Baringo and Goria and Lake Nakuru, and we'll talk more about these places, and Naivasha, and there's Elementaita too there. I've been to all these places. And then, also I forgot the Aberdares. We've been to the Aberdares as well. And then from Nakuru, we go down to the very famous Masai Mara, and we'll stay on both sides of the river there. And then other times we'll go over to Tsavo East and Tsavo West, and over to Amboseli as well. So And I've also been up to Meru, Miss Meru too. So we've been around quite a bit. And the first time I went to Africa was 1983. And it was during I was doing a trip around the world. This is my practice wife too. And she and I traveled around the world for about a year, and we spent time in Kenya doing a safari, and we did a camping safari. And this is in Samburu along the Wasa Niro, for those of you who know that. And as far as birds go, I looked back at my old pictures from that 1983 trip, and there was a northern carmine bee eater that I photographed in Savo, and I've never seen one since. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's an old Kodachrome slide. And then in 1993, I started leading tours for Voyagers International. And the fellow on my right, on the left of the picture, is David Karidi. And he was my first guide in Kenya. And David then guided for me many, many times since then. And here is David on my right. Here I am, of course, and here's David on my right in 2017. And Phoenix, here's Edwin over here, and Zachary, and this is David's wife, Regina. And so it was wonderful. David had retired, but he came down to visit me when we went through Lake Nakuru. And Edwin and Zach and were all, they were the guides this time. So when I first started guiding in Kenya, these are the kind of vehicles we used, and this was back in the film days. And so, but this one fellow had a 600mm lens, and his wife had a little disposable camera just to show the difference types of people we have along. Bill Stripling, who's here tonight, that's him sitting in the back, and then I would be riding up here. The vehicle has 3 rows of seats behind the driver, and each person has their own row of seats. I could give everybody a window seat, but it would get way too crowded. So everybody has their own row of seats. So they have room for their camera gear. Each one has a roof hatch, and they can photograph out of either side without anybody else being in the way. Now, if you look down here, there's a logo, and that logo is for East African Ornithological Safaris. And that was the name of the outfit that I started to, that I worked with. And these folks were not only known for their just the expertise in guiding, but also their expertise with birds. And the owner of EAOS was Don Turner, author of this book on birds of Kenya. And so a lot of his guides then got to know, he taught many of his guides a lot about birds. And Don is probably the expert on birds of Kenya. And his first client was Roger Torrey Peterson. The truth of the matter is, the birds could very well live without us, but many, perhaps all of us, would find life incomplete, indeed almost intolerable, without the birds. So he started off with very famous clients. And then here's David again, a little bit older, on another trip, and they changed the name of the company from East African Ornithological Safaris to Origin Safaris. And David guided for most of the top photographers in the world, actually, so we were always thrilled to have him. And my my clients, I treat them we always use luxury accommodations that are always very safe and secure. Actually, when we tell people that we're staying in tents in Kenya, this is a tent. You know, this is people don't realize, they can't picture or visualize what we're talking about when we say that we're staying in tents. These are beautiful, very roomy accommodations. There's sinks, running water, toilet, shower, hot water, the whole 9 yards. Very, very wonderful accommodations. And then right outside the tent, you have no idea what you might see. Here you can see, I had 3 groups, and I was in one vehicle, and you can see why you can only have 3 people per vehicle, because the just the demand for equipment and for room and being able to photograph, you have to just have 3 people per vehicle. If you had double that amount, it would just be impossible to get the good photographs. Here's Felix down here, and this is Stanley, which is David's son. My guess is that David was driving the vehicle I was in. Now we come to, most everybody comes to photograph the high season, the migration of the wildebeest, which is still amazing. And we see the migrations. You've all seen the videos and the programs about the migration across the Mara River, and perhaps some of the dangers involved in that. People also love to photograph the cats, the big cats, and the big 5, the leopard, the lions, elephants, rhinos. Although this is actually white rhino, and black rhino is part of the big 5, and then the African buffalo, or Cape buffalo as well. And of course, scenics, the Mount Kilimanjaro and Amboseli, and sometimes it's just no animals, but wonderful scenics. I always tell David, when the light is getting good, or any of the guys, I said, find an object, just find us an object. And another thing, I like to have people, our participants, get involved with the local people as much as we can, and visit with them. And here we are at David's house. A number of times we would go to have lunch at David's house, and when we were in Nakuru, and so the ladies would all dress up, and we'd have a wonderful meal and so forth. And we would also visit the Maasai and Samburu tribes. And Bill, I think you took this picture of me back a number of years ago. And when I go to, when I am going to meet somebody who has never met me before, I send them this picture and I tell them I'm the one in the hat. And here we are interacting with the Samburu tribe, and this is the woman right here in the middle is Rose. She's a school teacher, and Dan Cox, another photographer friend, had a fund drive to contribute books to her school. She's a school teacher, and I also contributed, and then brought some things to her, and so that's Rose. And for some reason, she has put me on her Facebook page. And this is on the left is Steve and the chief. And we always like to interact with the locals, and sometimes they have to help give us a push. All right, talk a little bit about birds. Two kinds of ostrich that we have in Kenya. The one you notice here, the red neck and the red legs on the male. And sometimes they will sit on the nests, on the eggs. And then there's also the Somali ostrich, which has kind of a blue-gray neck and blue-gray legs. And of course, when we talk about birds in Africa, we often think about flamingos. And there's two types of flamingos, the greater and lesser. You can see the difference here. It's pretty obvious. The greater is much larger, the lesser. And there's also different colorations on the bill. And here's a bunch of greaters being followed by a couple of lessers. Here's a lesser. Now, when I first came to Kenya, 1983, I went to Nakuru then, but then in 93 and on for quite a while, there were just millions. Willis and Edwin were going to give you a chance to speak here in a minute about, but there were many, many Mingi flamingos. And this was a photo I took in 2006, and here it was in 2017. This is Lake Nakuru when I was here last in 2017. The level of the lake had risen considerably, and all these trees are dying, and there's just a few flamingos in the shallows. This is a road marker where, which is the road is now underwater. And Willis and Edwin, if you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Great Rift as far as Nakuru and Baringo and Victoria and so forth.
Okay. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I think Edwin obviously is on the ground and I'm here, but my information will be based more on what I've read. So Edwin might give you a much more first-hand on-ground experience. But I'm also in the waterfowl, the Nature Kenya Bird Committee, and we've been discussing this over the last month. And one of there's a lady who's in one of the lakes as well that's flooding. For a long time, they thought that it was just simply rain, because we would see whenever it rained a lot, the lakes would flood and then recede, but never to the point where basically they've been flooding and flooding. And now the theory is that there's a lot of Lake Nakuru and others as well, where the flamingos are, is in a very unstable area with probably a lot of geothermal activity underground. And so one of the hypotheses is that there's all these openings underground where the water is coming from other places, all the rainwater, and the water table has come up. And so regardless of whether it rains or not, the water table is coming up from what was probably blocked vents, and that's has created. It's not just Nakuru, and obviously that has meant that it is impacting. So the pictures that Bob showed there, where there was a lot of flamingos and then there was less, the flamingos feed on plankton, for example. And as long as the pH of the water, it has to be a certain right, a pH has to be just about right for the plankton to thrive, which is what the lesser flamingos especially feed on. And whenever that is off balance, then that affects the numbers and flamingos have to move out. And I think that has been the case. These were saline lakes that have now become very fresh, have become more and more fresher than before. And so it's affecting the food of the flamingos. So that explains that. I don't know if Edwin has something to add. Edwin.
Yeah, I think
Edwin, do you have anything to add?
For a long time, we thought it was rain. But yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I was saying, Actually, not really. I think Willis has said it all. And it's what is currently happening is affecting all the Rift Valley lakes from Lake Nakuru all the way to Lake Turkana in the north. So it's become very hard to see flamingos. I mean, the big numbers of flamingos we used to see. But I think the positive thing here is that at least the lakes have filled up. You can remember way back in about 20 years ago, I think it was 2000, the lakes had dried up. So I think this is better than drying up. We know we'll see the flamingos again.
Sunday. Yeah. So,
right.
Yes, something else that I might add. Bob said I'm an environmental historian, so I'm thinking, because I didn't mention Lake Turkana, which is far north, that what we do know, if I was to, for example, go back to the map of Africa, there's a lake in Chad, which about 7,000 years ago used to come connections all the way to Lake Turkana. And I think probably need to dig into some of the literature and see that this might be that at the time, the water table that I was talking about might have just been there underground and clogged up, and now they've just opened up. The vents have opened up. So it might still be the big water table that they talk about under there. It's a big stretch.
Yeah. And this is in the Rift Valley, so the tectonic plates could be moving and it could be releasing underground aquifers just naturally. But there's also geothermal activity. People are trying to harness geothermal power, and this might be disrupting it as well, is my understanding. Yeah, so for you birding people, get a little bit closer to this picture here, and there's a number of different birds. And we'll start on top and go from left to right, just in case you're curious what we have here. And Willis and Edwin, I'm going to go through a bunch of birds here, and I don't know whether folks want to just say something about, I don't know whether we want to say something about each bird, but you might just want to say, I don't know, if you feel like it, identifying characteristics, behavior of the birds or something like that. You guys are the experts. Gray heron, there's great cormorant in this picture. Here are the great cormorants on, they're standing on hippos.
Yes.
This is in Navasha. There's another type of cormorant called the long-tailed cormorant. These are immatures, and this is what a mature one looks like.
Oh, there's them, long-tailed.
This is a little egret, and can tell by the black legs and the gold feet. Gray-headed gull was also in that picture.
Yep, that's good. I think the only thing to say, I mean, we'll leave that identification to you. We'll add in if there's anything else to do. But what Edwin said about the water is that as long as, so obviously the pH value of the water is changing, but just looking at the few images that Bob has just shown here, what, especially with the cormorants, what Edwin and I obviously can say here is that there definitely for us will be a shift in the number of birds that we haven't been used to seeing. For example, the other day I was at a meeting with the waterfowl count, and somebody said that they'd seen the African data. I haven't seen that bird for 30 years, but now in Baringo, they're actually nesting there. So obviously there will be some birds that will benefit from more water or more fish in this case, if it becomes fresh water, more and more fresh water. And we'll just start seeing some birds that we probably hadn't seen for a while, especially as the lakes were drying up.
Okay, good.
I don't know when did you see a data last?
Oh, JPEG. I mean,
Yeah, it's been, I
yeah,
haven't.
JPEG. Their datas have become very scarce because of fishermen's nets.
Mhm.
They are one of the biggest casualties in Kenya. And
Now, Willis,
they're
didn't
not
you
quite common.
say that
More fresh.
oops.
Go ahead, Bob.
Didn't you say, Willis, that you said that the how high had the water raised in
About
Baringo?
30 feet.
30 feet.
Yes. So this is not this particular lake. Edwin probably hasn't. This is Baringo. So Baringo is one of what was a freshwater lake that's about 100, about 80 miles north of this lake that Bob, the Lake Nakuru. And it was a freshwater for a long, it's always been a freshwater, but next to it was another Lake Bogoria. They were about 20 kilometers apart, about what, 10 miles, 12 miles or so. The distance between them now, because of the water coming up, is now just about 1.5 miles. And obviously that, yes. So they also fear that we have fresh water on the one hand and an alkaline lake. And if they too much, it will definitely impact the pH for both, but we don't know what the impact will be. Suddenly it's impacted the livelihoods of the local people around. And Edwin just mentioned the data and the fishing. The nesting is actually in Baringo, Edwin, that the lady from Ireland Camp said. We were at a meeting there, they showed that this was actually at Baringo, they're nesting the data.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Just going through a few of the.
Bob, can I add something?
Yes, of course, Edwin.
I think we're talking about the Rift Valley, and I'm not sure that everybody understands what the Rift Valley is. Those who've been to Kenya do, but the Rift Valley is actually a split right through the African continent that is splitting Africa into two. So it's said to be spreading, or the gap is spreading at about 1 inch a year. So that it's a trough that has formed across the African continent from Mozambique to Israel, and that's why, and therefore it's a low-lying area, and hence all these lakes dotted along it. So I hope that gives you a clearer picture of what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you for explaining that, Edwin.
That was great.
Just going through some other water birds here. Hottentot teal, Cape teal, cattle egret, great egret. There's a lot of really neat birds. I love the bee eaters. You can see it's got a bee in its bill. And here's a little bee eater. And yellow-fronted bee eaters. They don't have hummingbirds in Kenya, but they have sunbirds. Just beautiful, beautiful birds. Golden-winged sunbird, bronze sunbird, scarlet-chested sunbird, variable sunbird, and then very, very.
If you may, something about the sunbirds, Bob.
Yes, go ahead.
Hummingbirds, and you'll see this as well. So I know we have hummingbirds in the U.S., and you mentioned sunbirds. They're actually not even the same family, but they do fill in the same niche. What is the word, Edwin? Is it allotropy? There's a word for it. So over time, as the continent spread, some species either became separate species, but also all fill the same niche. So the sunbirds in Kenya, which feed on nectar, and pretty much of Africa, whereas in the US you have hummingbirds. But hummingbirds are actually related closer. They are closer related to swifts than the sunbirds. The sunbirds are actually on their own. You see the same, but there are some birds that fill the same niche in the US. You have the meadowlark that I've seen here in Texas and obviously in the West. And in Africa, we would have the yellow-throated longclaw. I don't know if you have a picture, but when you see that for those who haven't seen it, it'll be very clear what I mean.
I have one.
Okay.
Yes.
So they fill the same niche, whether it's grassland or what they feed upon, what they feed on.
And then there are the hornbills, just very, very unique bills on the birds. This is the black and white casked hornbill, eastern yellow-billed hornbills, Launder Dickens, red-billed hornbill, southern ground hornbill, and there's more hornbills that I have pictures of that I haven't put everything in. Same with bee eaters and sunbirds too. But just giving you an example, a taste of what these birds look like. Heron, striated heron, common squawko, rufous-bellied heron, purple heron, Goliath heron, very popular bird that people love to photograph are the lilac-breasted rollers. And here's a purple roller, also called rufous-crowned roller. Just beautiful birds, just beautiful birds. And barbets, a number of different types of barbets, red-fronted barbet, nose barbet, red and yellow barbet. These guys hang out on termite mounds, eat the termites. Here's Willis. Do you want to talk about the yellow-throated longclaw?
Yeah, so that's some of you are familiar with this bird here. Not this bird, but a bird that looks very similar. The meadowlark. I've seen both the western and eastern variants. But this is a longclaw. So they fill the grassland niche in Africa, and you see they fill the grassland niche in the US. The word I'm looking for here, I think it's allotrope or something. It'll come. As I tell my students, English is not my first language. Sometimes it takes me a while to process and remember the big words.
Yeah, Willis. Willis.
Yeah.
Willis.
Yes.
It's a convergent evolution.
There's convergent evolution, yes, but there's actually a different. Yes, there's that, but there's a word. I think it's allotrophy or something that actually, yes, is synonymous with that. But, so you can see what I mean by that. The hornbills that Bob showed in South America, the birds that fill the same niche are the toucans. They're not related, but they do the same. They fill the same niche, sort of feeding on fruits and whatever else they do.
Thank you. And then there's another longclaw called the rosy-breasted longclaw. This one much more difficult to find and photograph because they hang out on the ground in the grass.
Beautiful, yeah.
You know, it's so many of the animals remind me of something like Dr. Seuss would invent. I mean, like giraffes and zebras and so forth. It's just, you'd think that Dr. Seuss invented them. Here's the Volturine guinea fowl. Here's the helmeted guinea fowl. Something only a mother would love, you know. Starlings, our starlings here in the US are very plain looking, and of course they're not even indigenous to North America. They came from Europe, but the starlings in Africa are just wonderful. Rupel's long-tailed, greater blue-eared. These are superb and wattled starlings, and they're all in a bush and all congregated. And the reason why they are is because there's a snake down below. So oftentimes you can tell what's going on by the behavior of other animals. Like if you hear monkeys chattering, you know maybe a leopard's coming, those kinds of things. Here's a superb starling, beautiful bird. and it has a white belly band and a white eye, and a similar bird is the Hildebrand starling, which has the red eye and no white. The wattled starling, you can see the wattle on the one on the left. These guys, it's amazing how the birds just perch on these spiny thorns. And golden-breasted starling as well, beautiful bird. Some of the raptors, auger bustard. There's one flying, long-crested eagle, brown snake eagle, African fish eagle. Some people mistake this for our bald eagle, and I've actually seen posters and people thinking it's a bald eagle, but this is the African fish eagle. Black-chested snake eagle, martial eagle. This is the largest eagle, isn't it, guys, in Kenya? Yes. And tawny eagle comes in a number of different color variations. Steppe eagle. Battler. Do we consider this an eagle or not? Sometimes, Willis, what do you think?
I haven't followed up much on it for a while. I don't know what you can add. I know things are, well, this is something that is coming up more and more, borders with everything, especially with eBird. And I think they're saying that now we're getting splits and, but I think the battler, I don't know what Edwin you're saying. I would consider it an eagle, but obviously they have sometimes that they try to have it on its own. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Willis and Bob. A battler is not an eagle. True eagles belong to the genus Aquila, and one of their characteristics is having feathered legs all the way down to the talons. So the battler is actually Terathopius, that's a genus, which is unlikely to change because it's just not an eagle. So this guy will never be an eagle. He's a battler. But I think it's like acacias in Africa. When they say they're no longer called acacias, it just doesn't make sense. I think it's the most beautiful eagle in Africa, even though scientifically it's not one.
Yep.
So the main difference here is a feathered talons, feathered legs.
Just like that.
And it's named after, it's a French name named after a tightrope walker because when they fly, they kind of tip from side to side. African pygmy falcon, great kestrel.
Once they tip.
What's that? Did you want to say something, okay, Edwin?
Yeah, I was just saying that once they take off, it's a very unique looking eagle. It has a very short tail and strangely feathered wings. And once they take off, they do not flap their wings. They just glide and glide and glide for hours. And that's why it's called a tightrope walker. That's where the French word tightrope walker comes from. Okay, back to you.
Rose eagle owl, they have the pink eyes. Pearl spotted owlet. Here's the male saddle-billed stork. You notice it has a black eye. Now you can see what the whole bird looks like. Woolly-necked stork. I've got a lot of kingfisher pictures. I just put one in. Malachite kingfisher. There's a lot of other ones too. Oxpeckers, two kinds. There's the red-billed oxpecker and the yellow-billed oxpecker. I'll go back and see it there. And Cory bustard, gray-crowned cranes.
Did you add something about the bursted?
Yeah,
With it's, I mean, in Africa, it's actually the heaviest flying bird in Africa. Obviously, I think the heaviest flying bird is is it the Arabian bursted? But in Africa, one that is from Africa is a Cory bustard.
right. The largest
28
flying bird.
pounds.
What?
28 pounds. 28 to 30 pounds.
That's right.
Wow, 28 to 30 pounds. Okay. Hoopoe, African hoopoe, hammercop. When I did this presentation to the Birds Club, I asked them if they knew what the name of this bird was, and nobody did. And it's actually probably the most common bird in the whole world. And it's the red-billed qualia. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this bird. Right after I got back home in 2017, the Kenyan government took upon itself the destruction using explosives and poisons of 5 million birds in a qualia colony in part of Kenya where the birds were coming down in rice fields. So they killed 5 million birds, the government did. And I spoke with friend Steve and emailed him in Kenya and asked him about this. And his response was, the widespread use of poison is simply devastating and a huge contributor to widespread slaughter of other birds. As for its effect on those that eat the rice, goodness only knows, but seems no one cares anymore. If you want to get rid of any pest, then the African way is simply poison it. Very sad. There have been some attempts to use drones, noisemakers, and grow some of the rice plants with spiny leaves, but I think it's still a problem.
If I may, Bob.
Go ahead.
I'm going to put on my academic hat here. So I know it says the African way, but as an environmental historian, I would actually say that's a colonial way that the African governments inherited. Africans didn't use poison on this. They never went to traditionally they didn't take such drastic measures. The idea of getting rid of any bird or animal that was considered a pest starts from the colonial period, where they would, in fact, for a long time, they were poisoning even lions. And just like in the US, there's a history of poisoning of wolves. The same was there in colonial Africa. And it has just been taken over that in modern Africa now, we think that that's the easiest way, that if I think my crops are being, if birds are affecting my crops, and I'll get rid of them in the quickest way, shortest way possible. And obviously, as you do mention, it has this element of biomagnification that people oftentimes don't think about, where you kill the quailias, then you'll kill whatever else feeds on the quailia, and it could be a jackal, it could be another cat or something. So it then builds up in the food chain, and it's a big issue, yes. So it is a colonial way, it's not the African way. I'll just be academic on that.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Willis. Yes, good point. Some of you may be familiar with a program that used to be called the Big Cat Diary or Big Cat Weekly. Many years ago, it used to follow, it would follow leopards and cheetahs and lions. And did that for many years. And I'm going to talk about the Marsh Pride. And back in, this was a news release in December of 2015. News broke, I'll read part of this article here. This is by Jonathan Scott. News broke of the poisoning of members of the Marsh Pride. These are lions that his wife and I have followed since 1977 and were the stars of our Big Cat TV series that documented the fascinating and often tumultuous life of the Pride over a period of more than 12 years. And at the end, he says, I wish I could say that this was shocking news, but there's nothing shocking anymore about what is happening in the Masai Mara. Tens of thousands of cattle encroach into the reserve every night when the visitors are safely out of sight. But when the likelihood of conflict with predators such as lions and hyenas is at its greatest, this makes no sense. And then the Marsh Pride came back a bit, and another BBC series called Dynasty followed the Marsh Pride again, and this was in 2018. I'll read just the BBC Dynasty film crew absolutely devastated after lions poisoned by farmers with toxic meat. But heartbreak is just around the corner when the crew discovers the lions have been poisoned by Kenyan farmers. And this was a David Attenborough hosted program. Now, what does this mean for birds? Here's a Rupal griffon vulture. 7 of Africa vulture species are on the edge of extinction now because of poisoning. And in the articles it mentioned that the grazing goes on inside the reserves. It said at night, but now they're doing it during the daytime too. And some of these reserves, they'll go in as far as 5 miles into the reserves. Here's cattle inside the Masai Mara Reserve. Here's cattle inside the Amboseli National Park. Here's goats inside Samburu. I photographed all these. And here are some of the vultures. Here's the Rupal's griffon vulture, critically endangered. The African white-backed vulture, critically endangered. These things used to be as common as anything, 20 years ago or more. The hooded vulture, critically endangered. The white-headed vulture, critically endangered. Lappet-faced vulture, endangered. Here's a palm nut vulture, which is not endangered, and I've only seen one, and I don't know how many, in the many years I've been in Kenya. But apparently the Marsh Pride has come back again, and they have actually a Facebook page. And Edwin, would you like to say anything more, Willis, about the Marsh Pride and the overgrazing in these reserves?
Edwin, you're on the ground. Edwin, do you want to say something first, and then I'll probably give a commentary about the poisoning as well, so with sort of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think the marsh lions were certainly I think the most famous lions in Kenya through the various programs BBC have aired. I think there was a BBC Big Cat Diary that ran for 12 years, and they were the main stars. This marsh we're talking about used to stretch maybe about 1.5 kilometers to 2. and was a dense marsh that an elephant would walk into and disappear. Right now, if you go there, even a hare cannot hide. It's sad. But that general area, because of the fresh water, receives a lot of attention from the local cattle, or a lot of cattle go and drink there. A lot of people go and collect their water there. So that naturally creates room for conflict between man and the lions and so on. So I've only been to the Mara. I mean, because of this pandemic, I've not been to the Mara lately. But the last time I was there, they had actually reformed. There was 5 new males that were in the process of taking over, and the marsh and the pride developing again. So naturally, I mean, the Mara, that area is very, that part of the Mara. It's probably the prettiest part of the park, and also a lot goes on there. So Willis, you can carry on.
So actually, you already touched on what I wanted, and then this goes. Bob, Bob said, I look at African and environmental history, and so what essentially environmental history does is we look at the relationship of humans and nature, and vice versa, how nature has impacted human life. Now, part of what I also do look at is I challenge some of the narratives that you oftentimes get, and you can see it in the language that Jonathan Scott and David Attenborough are actually alluding to there, which is, if you think about it, they're saying farmers, they're not saying the Maasai, because there's a lot of politics when you touch on the Maasai. And the poisoning in the Mara has less to do with farmers, but more to do with the cattle and the pastoralists. But because they have a lot of, my research actually argues that they have, historically, they've had a lot of power with regard to basically informing the political, the conservationist policies that oftentimes, due to the politics of a day, we have never really had policies that are good enough, that actually will address the challenges that we have. And I know, and Edwin also knows this about Jonathan Scott, at some point could not say anything bad about them, not necessarily bad, but negative about the Maasai relationship with wildlife. He was a photographer, he was a zoologist, and there was this idea that the Maasais lived pretty much relatively harmoniously with wildlife. I challenge that, not necessarily because I do it, but I look at the changes that have happened. And Attenborough is saying farmers as opposed to pastoralists because he knows the politics of on the ground, and Edwin can speak a lot to this. We've seen that with the way the area around the marsh has basically been at a certain point when the Kenya Wildlife Service, or at least wanted to at least try and get people to move away from such areas, then the politics of the day carried the day, and nothing was, and basically nothing good towards wildlife was done. So the argument that I make in my research is that the Maasai actually have had this power during the colonial period, but also into independent Kenya. And oftentimes, unless they actually buy into conservation, which most of them do, because some of them do, but because cattle mean everything for them, then cattle basically takes precedence. And so they're poisoning the lions because lions to them would attack cattle sometimes due to that, the conflicts that are more and more now. And that's a big issue. That the issue here is that they actually poison, they leave the poison, not necessarily especially for the lions, but oftentimes for the hyenas as well. And then the lions get caught up in that because they also might scavenge. And that's a big issue. So it is the politics of conservation, and that's what I look at. And you see it in the rhetoric that Attenborough would rather say farmers as opposed to pastoralists, because somebody probably told him if he gets into that with the Maasai, it might be an issue. I don't know if Edwin can add something else to that.
I think
he's a Maasai, by the way. Edwin is a Maasai, so I'm not saying that he's.
You know, traditionally, if the Maasai, or when the Maasai could kill wild animals, or for whatever reason it was. If it was, I mean, you got that stereotype sentence that to become a man, you have to kill a lion in Masai, as a Masai.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
because there's just way too many of us. So without taking that into context, it becomes very tricky to make some of these decisions. So, so I think what we should say though is that a lot of the Maasai have embraced conservation, because in the later years, they have made better earnings from the national parks, camps, and lodges, which initially in the past would have been a source of conflict and in such conservation areas. So I think we're heading in the sort of in the right direction, but there's just way too many of us.
Okay,
Back to you.
good. I think we're kind of running a little late here, so I'm going to keep on going here. I'm just going to, I was going to mention something about just habitat destruction, and just acknowledge that it is and it's going on. And they're thinking of fencing off, this is Nairobi National Park, and they're thinking of fencing off the back part. And so animals can't migrate in and out of it. And this is a problem. And Willis, do you want to briefly just discuss a little bit about deforestation? Just so we can keep moving ahead here.
Okay, I will. I just give, this is just some notes. The big picture is Kenya faces a serious alarming rates of deforestation. There's a lot of forest cover being cut because of farming, trees, and for wood, timber, and everything. So what we know, I think the most comprehensive study that was done was, I think, in 2015, and we're down to about 7% of the country's forest cover. Kenya is about the size of Texas, relatively speaking, size-wise, and we only have about 7%. Now the government is trying to at least, it has a goal, which all governments definitely have oftentimes, is to bring this up to about, at least by 2022, I don't know if that's feasible, to about 10% and maintain that through a 2030 goal. I don't know if that's possible, but forest cover, deforestation is a big issue because obviously, even just talking about birds or wildlife in general, we need the forest because this is where we get some of them species that survive in this, need the forest cover, but also animals, elephants, and such as well. But also the forests are, Bob mentioned the Mara. One of the forest covers that we have is the Mau here. And the deforestation that has gone on there, it's about 25% within just the last 30 years. And that threatens places like the Mara as well. So while the Maasai may, I mean, one of the reasons that they're actually getting less and less grass cover, or at least water, is because the forests are being cleared upstream, and then there's less water for them as well. So it just compounds the human-wildlife conflicts that we have. This is just to give you an idea that oftentimes it's they blame the people on the ground, but it is the politicians that end up getting all the cover, all the, I mean, the benefit. They're able to do things here. So that's what we mean by squatters are people who supposedly live illegally in forest reserves in this case. But you can see there the hypocrisy, and then it becomes political as well. So. Okay, so that's just again an idea to give you. So what you have here. If you could go back to the slide back there, Bob. On the right, the one on the top, the very green. Those are tea plantations that are oftentimes owned by big shots, big politicians. Yet on the other hand, you saw that lady there trying to make a living. And so those are some of the challenges that we have. And so forests are either being, you have the big, the people in power cutting off big chunks for tea plantations or selling off the land, and yet you have people without land being kicked out. So it's not a very easy balance to get. So, yeah, that's.
I mentioned Opajita earlier, and there's a chimp reserve, Jane Goodall Chimp Reserve. Chimps are not indigenous to Kenya, but there's a reserve there as well, in Opajita. And oops, got to go the other way here. As we go through the woods to visit the reserve, we're encountered with these signs here. I'll read them quickly. We're your closest relatives, so like you, highly intelligent. Humans are our greatest threat through logging and the bushmeat trade. If you kill our trees, you kill us. Our parents were killed for meat. We are refugees from war against forests. Please stop the war. And oftentimes there's a photograph within a photograph. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner down here, you see this. And this just speaks volumes to me. These are, probably 3 different animals just holding hands as they're lying there together. These are sentient beings. Willis, I'm going to just mention briefly about poaching.
Edwin probably has what's on the ground, but I took this picture. This sort of speaks to poaching, and the word itself can be. This was actually in Chulu. And what you have here is that this animal had probably, the elephant had probably raided somebody's crops, and it was attacked by using a poison arrow. And over time, eventually it got infected. The foot you can see there. And this is a ranger, Kenya Wildlife Service ranger, and they had to put it down. So again, this speaks to the human-wildlife conflicts that oftentimes we don't see of every day, where somebody's crops can be, an elephant can raid a farmer's crops, and the only way, especially if they don't get compensated, as Edwin was saying, is sometimes try to take matters in their own hands, and then you have this compounding effect where you get sad images like this, where they eventually had to put down. Actually, there was 4 of them that they had to put down within a month in this area from poison arrows. Poaching, yes, is still a big issue that has actually taken different perspectives now. In fact, I do look at, in my classes, sometimes I talk about international terror that you're probably familiar with, where poachers across, so it's not just the farmer now, it's actually, you have terrorists who come in, it's easy for them to poach elephants. The price of ivory or rhino horn on the market is I think worth more than gold at some point. And so they make more money there that they can then launder and fund their terror activities. So it's a big issue right now. I know, especially, I was reading recently, and Edwin, like I said, will probably fill in on this. Given the year that we've had, there's a fear that more elephants probably have been killed where nobody, because you didn't have the everyday, as long as people are traveling in some of these parks, oftentimes it puts some of the poachers out. But because nobody has been going in some of these areas, it's taken a strain on some of the efforts to at least keep bad guys at bay. Edwin?
Yeah, that's very rightly said. I don't think, it's really bad because rangers too have been laid off like other people. And without people driving around the parks, there's definitely less security. So we only hope that things will get back to normal. Otherwise, it's going to be catastrophic. Back to you, Bob.
Okay, yeah. Willis mentioned rhinos as well that are being poached. This is a scene photographed. We were here last time, 2017, and it was a kind of a rainy, dreary evening. And what this is in Opajita again, private wildlife conservancy, where they raise and protect rhinos. And these are memorials for the rhinos that have been poached on their grounds. I think since 2004, if I'm not mistaken. One of the most poignant markers is one for Ishirini. Ishirini means 20. I'll read this. Female black rhino, likely killed by use of poisoned arrows. The security team found her writhing in pain with her horns already chopped off. She was 12 months pregnant. If this doesn't gnaw at your gut and tear at your heart, I don't know what will. This is just so sickening. I'll read this one more time. Ishirini, female black rhino, likely killed by use of poisoned arrows. The security team found her writhing in pain with the horns already chopped off. She was 12 months pregnant. We are capable of suffering with our world, and that is the true meaning of compassion. It enables us to recognize our profound interconnectedness with all beings. Don't apologize for crying. Don't apologize for the sorrow, grief, and rage you feel. It's a measure of your humanity and your maturity. It is a measure of your open heart. And as your heart breaks open, there will be room for the world to heal. There is really no such thing as race. We all come from Africa. We are all of the same stardust. We are all going to live and die on the same planet, a pale blue dot in the vastness of space. We have to work together. And I want to, I'm just wrapping up, remind you folks to check out my website, see the many images of birds of Beast Africa, check out the other galleries as well. All active and attractive single women can submit marriage proposals to Robert Winslow, robertw.dro@gmail.com. And please include your net worth along with your list of qualifications. And Asante Sana, thank you very much. You folks have been great. I love you all very much. And this is the last slide. And we're up for questions. And I just want to also put up this, where if people want to contribute to Nature Kenya, there's a website, and over on the left here, it says, here's where you can donate. So we're open for questions.
Just quickly, thanks, Bob. And so this is Nature Kenya, and Edwin and I know very well. So I met Edwin first in 1992. He was in Amara. I'd just come, this used to be called the East African Natural History Society. And I remember when Edwin and I were guiding, we were very young at the time, and they used to call us the birding boys, Vijana and Ndege. So essentially the bird boys, not B-A-D, but B-A-I, bird like a bird, B-A-I-R-A-R-D. At the time, David, that Bob mentioned, obviously we were the guys who did the birding and they did the wildlife safaris. But we've come a long way. For us, birding was a hobby before we got into, made it a career. And I think I look at Nature Kenya where I would go there on a Wednesday morning after high school and volunteer. And that took me a long way. And eventually I got the job, and that's why I met Edwin eventually in Amara. But now what we've seen is over time, there's initially there was only, I think, 3 or 4 of us going to the museum for birding. Now there's hundreds, probably thousands of, but by that I mean Black people who look like me who are there. Now there's hundreds, so there's more. So it's grown, and they do a lot of conservation work. And I'm part of the bird committee, and so that's what when Bob asked me if I had any where that he'd like people to donate. That's why I said Nature Kenya is where I got my first start as a birder.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna open this up, turn that off, and go back to gallery view and see all your wide awake, handsome and beautiful faces. And we're open for questions. Nobody has
No
any
question, but a
questions?
comment. Bob, thank you very much for your presentation and your colleagues from Kenya. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Eb.
Yeah, thank you.
Eb has used to work in Kenya. We should mention that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, did you just say Eb Redford used to work in Kenya?
Didn't you? No, it
No.
was, no, I'm sorry. It was something, I have you, who else is UFD did? I'm drawing a blank, but okay, you did.
Let's chat and say, how can we support this?
Any other questions, comments?
This is Bill from Tennessee, Bill and Tammy, and what a wonderful, wonderful program. And we are so glad to be a part of that. And we learned so much, and we support the efforts of everyone working toward the conservation and those efforts that we saw as such a challenge in Kenya and other places. Thank you so much, Bob, for hosting this and bringing this to our attention. Thank you to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Brother Bill.
Hi,
We're glad you tuned in.
I had a question. When you were talking about the one eagle that wasn't necessarily an eagle, and then you mentioned that acacia trees aren't technically acacia trees or something, and I was just curious about what that distinction was of, can we still call acacia trees, or are they a different species that we now know of?
Edwin, did you mention that or something?
Yeah, I think it was that.
Yes, I did. What happened is, I think acacias occur in both the African continent, Australia, and I think the US too. Now, about a few years ago, maybe up to 10, they did a reclassification of the family, and the acacias in each continent are different. So what happened was the oldest acacia the oldest acacias to be described are the ones from Australia. So what happened is now Australia gets to keep the genus Acacia, and then African acacias have been renamed to Senegal, which is the first acacia species to be described in Africa. So we've lost that genus technically, but in the books. But I think we in Africa will call those trees acacias for as long as we live.
Yeah, so it is all about, claiming the name acacia, and acacias in Africa are synonymous. So Australia wanted the credits, and I think that was part of the issue.
This is Werner.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the lakes with increasing water levels, they are landlocked, I'm assuming, with no outlet. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, they're landlocked lakes. And so what they're also looking at is, especially in the Rift Valley, the ones that we mentioned, the few that we mentioned, like Lake Nakuru, Baringo, Bogoria, and there's another one, Elementaita. What they're looking at now is they probably have some interconnected vents. And that's what probably over time, because it's a very unstable area, as Edwin and Bob have said, that some of those vents, and also with all the geothermal activity that's been going on, have been opened up or created. and there's connections among some of them. And so it might be that there's a lot of rain, say, for example, coming in from the Mau and Aberdares that is filling in one of the lakes, and then it sort of then builds up into the other ones. Now, that's a connection. So yes, correctly, they are landlocked. Edwin, is there any that has any outlets that I know? I know that they assume some of them have underground seepages that go somewhere, but we don't have any lakes, any rivers that go. Now you need to also consider that most of these lakes are actually at a very high altitude. They're on the floor of the Rift Valley, but about 5,000, 6,000 feet, some of them. So there's a lot of underground stuff that can go before they get to sea level.
But
Yeah.
rainfall, did rainfall actually increase?
Yeah.
Must have, right?
Yes.
No.
No, some rain over time. Oh, something else. I mentioned this to Bob. Something else to think about that tied to deforestation. What they've also, the reason that Baringo's water has come up is not just the underground vents, but also the siltation. As they've cleared the forests, a lot of the soil wash-off has come and basically collected onto the lakes. And that has also contributed to the rapid rise. The water, essentially the lake bed has risen up because of all the siltation.
And faster runoff.
Yes, yeah.
At the
Edwin, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What did you?
Faster runoff.
Okay, yeah.
With deforestation.
Yes.
Have they considered flooding? I mean, expanding like wildlife preserves are managed here, where lagoons are created and, East Coast or other places? Or that scale is not possible?
They're not talking about those scales because one of the challenges that we are having is actually, as Bob mentioned, we're actually losing a lot of habitats for conservation. And it's a big, oftentimes you run into politicians and people who are not necessarily people. It gets caught up in all the political. So when we might expect that we could use, some of that land and expand, oftentimes you want people who are actually encroaching more and more over time. So we've actually lost more than gained over time as well. Some areas we've expanded, but that, just like with the US, it depends if that land was government before or not, public land or not. Yeah.
Willis, has there been any work done on the salinity or the pH of that water? Do we know how it sits compared to like just a freshwater lake?
Edwin could add on to this because he knows probably what's on the ground. Much of what I know is definitely Nakuru, the pH level is now, is it less? It's less because of all the fresh water that's pumping in. Nakuru is supposed to be a semi-alkaline lake, and they're unique in that sense. And so as long as the pH level is high, it does affect the plankton growth. That would be what the flamingos, for example, would be feeding on. It's okay for other birds that, say, for example, feed on fish and other crustaceans that are there, but definitely flamingos are the one casualty that doesn't do very well in very fresh water. The greater flamingo can do a little bit better in freshwater lakes, but the lesser depends on those alkaline lakes.
Interesting, and it sounds like this is a relatively new phenomena, which would suggest the water is relatively, fresh or new that's in there. So over time, if there's no outflow, it would be interesting to see if that water becomes more saline as it evaporates. Like some of the basin and range country has those saline, playas that, because that evaporation become more and more salty over time.
Well, that's what they are. They are actually salty lakes. It's just that over time, that in recent years, the fresh water going in as opposed to the evaporation and whatever else it's imbalanced. There's an imbalance in the fresh water that's been coming in over the last years, and that's definitely affecting. But and I'll let Edwin also speak to this. What we've noticed is flamingos over time, over these thousands of years they've been there, they know where to go whenever one lake is out of sync. And so right now we are talking about Lake Logipi over by Turkana. That's where a lot of the flamingos are. There's a big concentration. that's because people ask, where do the flamingos go when then the millions are not in Nakuru? Well, they kind of figured out where they go up and down the Rift Valley over time. Edwin, do you want to add something on the pH level? Because I think you probably have more recent data than I do.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
that place.
and so on. And David, yes, there's a lot of studies that have been done on the Rift Valley lakes regarding their pH, salinity, and all. And what we're seeing here is that the plankton develops at an optimal point. Now, there used to be little cycles over the year, and flamingos would be at this lake today or for a couple of months, then move on to another lake. But this natural cycle in the last 10 years or so has been knocked off completely by this rising water, which is unnatural. And one of the hypotheses is that I know is all the geothermal drilling that is happening at the moment in Kenya. We're trying to go green. I don't know how green geothermal energy is, but we have hundreds, I think like hundreds of geothermal drills. They've drilled hundreds of holes into the ground, and you know they drill like 6 kilometers underground. And what is believed to be happening? Groundwater has a natural gradient and flows from east to west or west to east. And this seems to have been upset by the drilling and punctured has upset and therefore upset the natural water gradient. And what seems to be happening is water seems to be coming back up and rising the water table, because this is happening throughout the Rift Valley lakes, even in a lake like Lake Nakuru, Lake Turkana, Weno, down. So only time will tell. And then when we go back, Willis, to like 13,000 years in Kenya, all these lakes we're talking about were actually conjoined. Yeah. Lake Nakuru, Lake Naivasha, and Elementaita were one big water body. And so we don't know if it's a reverse if something is working in reverse and the lakes will be joined up together again, or we don't know. Only time will really tell.
Yep.
So there's a lot of new things happening. Global warming and all. And then the plankton too, because of all the forests that has been cut down, there is a lot of silt that has flown into the lakes. And one other thing it has done is covered the soda. You know, soda is responsible for producing plankton.
Yeah.
And there's a thick layer of mud at the base of each of these lakes. So the soil and water the soda cannot be mixed cannot mix up with the water again. And therefore there's a lot of new stuff that is going on in this world that we've never thought of before.
It's like fracking. Geothermal is like the fracking here, in that when they drill the imbalance, you can get the instant probably benefits, but then you upset the natural ecosystem. As Edwin says, that's something that's going on. Just to add on to the geothermal and the pylons, I think they're also talking about how the electric pylons in Kenya are actually affecting birds of prey or big birds that are migrating. So Edwin mentioned as well a while ago that is it within the last decade that they've changed the width between the electric wires over ground, and that has affected some of the birds that normally would perch on them. Right. So geothermal is, yeah.
So what you're
Yes,
saying,
since
Willis,
when-
is that the electrical lines are close together, and when the birds perch on the poles, they electrocute themselves.
That is another hypothesis that they're going to. So just to give you, is it 15 or 25% of Kenya's electric? So we're green in so far as we have hydro, just like hydro also creates imbalances, and then we have geothermal too. Between those two, most of our power comes from hydroelectric power. But over time, they've been trying to get more from geothermal power. And I know in the 90s, at least 2000, we were trying to get as much as 15%. That's probably increased over time. And so that has definitely created the push to go geothermal and go green, so to speak, has had all these issues that Edwin is also has just highlighted.
I think it's a lot higher now. It's maybe about 30 or 40.
30%, yeah.
And then we also have a lot of wind power from Lake Turkana and the Ngong Hills here and Garissa, which is another bad hazard again. You know,
Any other questions? You folks have been great. I know we took quite a bit of time here, but it's been really interesting, and it's been fantastic for me to see, people that like Karen. How long has it been? How many years? 43 years.
Did I say 43 years? I figured out it was just about that.
That's fantastic. So it's just great.
And we've managed to keep in touch, which is really nice.
That's great.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that is, on the early map, I saw the national parks and also the ones that Robert pointed out all over Kenya. Is there, I don't know what the migration routes are. I don't know what private and public land is. Is there any effort to create or is there a need for interconnecting park and based on migration routes, like what they're considering in the Rocky Mountains, have a continuing pathway for wildlife to migrate and interconnect to avoid isolation and genetic, separation, genetic mixing.
So there's, yes, it's there. Right? It's been part of Kenya's conservation history. Edwin just mentioned, for example, that the Maasai now get more, most of the Maasai, at least the ones around the Mara and Amboseli as well. By the way, Bob, the picture that you had of Amboseli at the beginning, and then Ernest Hemingway, he was there in the 1950s. So that was kind of, I don't know if you realized that when you took that picture, and maybe he was writing about Amboseli at the time, that's actually a picture from Amboseli. So yeah,
but that picture was one I took. It wasn't.
No, when you took it, but I'm saying Hemingway was actually in Amboseli in the 1950s. He was one of the first visitors there when they created Amboseli there. So yes, it's there. That partnership is there. It's just trying to find a way that, so you have public land and then you have private land. You need the private land to buy into conservation, which is what the Maasai are being, over time, they've been convinced, some of them, but not all of them, at least see the benefits of wildlife because of a history, as Edwin said, where some would not see the benefits. Because the land that we look at in the Mara, that is critical for wildlife disposal is actually on private land. Just like with Nairobi National Park that Bob said, the public land will always be there, but it also needs the private land. And this is where the Maasai are critical. And those of them who now have bought into it and are now at least creating, at least leasing their land for conservation, that is, I think, in my opinion, that is the future of wildlife conservation. The other side to that is the international boundary between, you mentioned the wildebeest, between Kenya and Tanzania. And that's all an issue sometimes. So we actually, the Mara is an extension of the Serengeti. It's the same ecosystem, just different, sort of the northern part. So oftentimes we have that conflict as well. So it's both private, public, but also international. And they have to bring all those different groups speaking together. And that's not easy to do when it comes to conservation. So yes, the effort is there. We could do more. It's, I think a lot of it depends with, as long as the revenue is flowing for the Maasai, they're fine. So that's the goal. I mean, that is the goal because they see it, they see the benefit. And the good thing is they've set a lot of land aside over time for wildlife. I don't know if Edwin has something else to add to that as well.
You know, Nature Kenya has actually been very instrumental in connecting migration or sites that are of importance for biodiversity. We've got the Kinango Plateau, where Nature Kenya actually bought pieces of land or used to either bought or paid for it not to be farmed so as to keep the bird habitat. And right now, I think they're trying to acquire some land down at the coast. So where the government has failed or where the government is busy failing, bodies like Nature Kenya come in and the private sector generally come in and try and do the connection or fill the gap that exists. Masai Mara is another, it's going to be another big issue in the very near future. It's already happening. We had this great migration. You got the majority of the animals will migrate to Tanzania and back to Nairobi, but a small percentage of that number, about 10%, traditionally migrated to the plains east of the Masai Mara, which is within Kenya. Now, in the last 4 years or so, that is not possible anymore because of the change in land use. Yeah. People have sold the pieces of land to other communities or individuals who are not interested, who are not pastoralists. So I buy my piece of land, fence it up, and that has broken or has stopped that migration that used to come out to the Loita Plains, which is very sad. And we just hope that that can be addressed before it's too late. On a positive note, somebody just donated about Fort National Park about a month and a half ago, which is great news for Nairobi National Park. It's a unique park. It's been under a lot of pressure, but a good Samaritan who has a huge chunk of land just donated a huge piece that will make a big difference. So, yes. So it's happening, and it needs help and support from every direction, from all stakeholders. Back to you, Bob.
Wasn't there a migration path at one point from Nairobi National Park down to Amboseli? And that's just kind of been cut off, hasn't it?
Yes, yes. And I think, Edwin, I'm not sure, I don't, it's good to hear that somebody's donated the land because the thing about Nairobi National Park that you showed them, it was the first park that was created in Kenya in 1946. Actually, it was created in 1939, but because of a war, they had to wait until 1946. And then Amboseli followed. So for a long time, up well into the 90s, wildlife would migrate all the way from Amboseli all the way to Nairobi National Park and vice versa. But as people settled around, bought land, we've cut off those migratory routes. So anything, and as Edwin is saying, as long as, just like with Nature Kenya, is buying parcels of land that they can to protect bird habitats, important birding areas, that was the goal, that was a hope for a long time, that people would actually leave some pathway between Amboseli and Nairobi National Park. Otherwise, Nairobi National Park would just be a mega zoo. I mean, yes, it will have some wildlife, but as long as the animals don't have a dispersal point, a dispersal area, which is very critical, where the buffer zones, then you can't really have, you can't have a very sustainable population, wildlife population, especially even for just genetic variation within the species themselves with regard to that. And you see it a lot with the increase in human-wildlife conflicts. So we still need those, we need those buffer areas, but also migratory routes. And Kenya could do more with regard to that connection between Nairobi and Amboseli, I think. Edwin, where's the land that somebody donated? Is it over by Kajiado?
It's Hopecraft.
Oh, Hopecraft. Okay.
Hopecraft and another ranch, which are actually quite, which is quite crucial as a corridor, wildlife corridor between Amboseli and Nairobi Park.
Okay.
Well, this is, any other questions? We're kind of been here for 2 hours now, but it's also been great to see everybody. Bill and Mary, wonderful to see you folks also, and everybody else, and those who are hiding behind your names. Would love to see your pretty faces as well, but I thank you very much. I hope this has been informative, and really, really, it was great to see everybody.
Hey, Bob, I think I have something. I have one thing, what's the word, the phrase here? You mentioned Roger Torrey Peterson. Did you meet him? Did you meet him?
No.
I did.
Did you? Tell me.
I did. I guided him for at least a day in Naivasha. We were with Don Turner. And I mean, at the time, obviously, and Edwin will know, we meet all these people. And then I came to, when I came to Miami, and people are saying about who are the most famous people that mentioned. And I was throwing this, I didn't think much about it, but not many people met him, at least the birders, when I had one of my ornithology professors at Miami. And he was surprised that I'd met him. I said, yeah, I did, at least for a day. I guided him for a day. So, yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Robert. That was really great. Thank you guys all for joining from all around the world.
Right. It's just been wonderful. Great seeing everybody. This has been so much fun. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill and Mary, goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi,
Bye.
Sarah.
Hi, hi,
Jackson, Jeannie, Ed,
Bye.
and Edwin, great to see you. Thank you so much for contributing. It's been great. And Willis, have your family come visit again?
Oh yeah, we will. They're here. They're around here. Obviously, we will when things calm down. When we went once, I think once it's safe to travel without having to worry about many other things. It's
Yes,
we will
yes,
come visit.
of course.
Thank you. Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm glad we could do this and be of help and contribute.
Yeah, thank you so much for your help. This was fun getting everybody together.
Yeah.
And Edwin, say hi to everybody back in Kenya for me. And
I will.
And there's Nicole. Did you make it through the whole presentation? How about your daughter? Did she?
She did. That's Raylan. She has a different last name than me, but she made it through as well. And we had a lot of use.
See you.
Thanks, Bob. We enjoyed it. We loved it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I certainly loved seeing everybody. And,
Thank you. I appreciate having you too.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful connect. Willis and Edwin and everybody. It's just been fantastic.
Okay.
Yes.
So Bob, if you want to say hi to the kids.
Yes. We're you got Valerie and Marty.
Yeah, they're here.
Yes, I'd love to see Valerie and Marty.
Bob, have you heard from David?
No, the last time I saw him was in 2017, and he doesn't communicate really, but it was nice that he came down and visited when we were in Nakuru.
Right, yeah. Okay. I hope he's doing okay.
Valerie apparently is gone upstairs. So this is that's Marty, Bob. Marty and
oh, hi Bailey.
She's taller than this. There you go. We visited Bob 2 years ago.
Marty and Vanessa?
That's no Bailey. Valerie's upstairs.
Bailey, yes, but where's Vanessa?
She's in the shower, so.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I was
We'll
just
set up
wondering where
another
she
meeting
was.
some other day.
Yeah. Well, good to see you folks. Yes, you're all growing bigger.
Yeah, taller. Yeah.
Yes.
I tell them they're getting close to the age when my dad told me I couldn't stay in his house anymore. So.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Sawa.
Bye, sawa.
Kwaheri.
All right, Bob. Thank you so much.
Bill and Mary, keep in touch, okay?